Greetings, fellow humans. I am Hugh.
And I am Man.
And together we are definitely not
Two
kobolds in a trench coat. We enjoy human activities, such as paying taxes,
Having existential crises,
and RPG horror stories. Let's see what we've got today. Today, we have a player who threatens to sue the DM, a player who is coerced into a relationship with their DM, and a game ruined by Order 66.
D&D player threatens to sue the DM over a character death by Reddit user HumbleMerchant99. So I played D&D at a local game shop that's kind of not great. Not that the store itself is bad, but the element is. I can't tell you how many murder hobos, R-word hobos, and general bad players I have to deal with. But it's the only game shop in the area, so I just kind of bounce from games or kick people when things get too effed up. That, and I have kind of built up a tolerance. But this one guy takes the effing cake. We were playing a campaign years ago. I was a dragonborn druid, that guy was a tiefling barbarian, and our DM, paid DM, was running a Dark Souls Elden Ring-esque campaign, but with more roleplay. Like, we lived in a castle with a lord who would send us on missions to help the battered towns in the area from the various monsters, demons, and magic-wielding warlords that would ravage them. That guy was not the sharpest tool in the shed. He was constantly assuming that the NPCs were out to get him, or secret spies or whatever, and would kill them or mouth off and accidentally reveal secrets and F up our mission. And potential allies in this campaign were in short supply, so his behavior often isolated us. He also argued with the DM a lot and accused him of trying to kill the party or railroad us because encounters were tough. He also got mad when the DM stopped him from R-wording a dying NPC who tried to assassinate the party. He said, "Oh, he can kill us, but I can't give him a taste of his own medicine, and I'm paying for this game, so why do you keep trying to control my actions?" This led to another back and forth about railroading. The final straw was when he died from a particularly brutal confrontation with a particularly nasty undead spellcasting warlord character who we had heard horror stories about. The rest of us fled after he died, and he began summoning backup in a fight that we were already losing. He was livid, and he accused the DM of targeted harassment and being unfair, and the DM just told him that he could roll a new character and that death was part of D&D. Then the guy said, "I am paying you $20 an effing session just for it all to be for nothing? F no! I want my money back!" The DM refused, and the guy kept yelling, so the DM offered him a refund for this session and that he could bow out of the campaign, but he said, "No, I want my entire campaign's worth of money back." The DM looked at him like he was crazy and said, "You paid for hundreds of dollars worth of sessions and used them. Hell no, you ain't getting that money back." And the guy just said, "Well, you basically ripped me off. It's called false advertising and fraud." This went back and forth until he said, "Fine, I'm going to tell the store owner." And the store owner, who had seen him play multiple sessions with the DM, just laughed in his face. So he said, "Okay, DM, let's see how you like losing everything. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." He then stormed out, and we never heard from him or any lawyer ever.
Well, I'm not surprised that we never heard from that Kyle's lawyer. He's just unhinged as hell. Someone tries to murder the party does not mean you try to SA them in return. It means you can try to kill them in return, sure. This guy was just unhinged and just couldn't accept his character's death, which I'm sure was entirely as a result of his own actions.
Yeah, I get the feeling that this guy was like, oh, pay to play means I get to do whatever I want because I'm paying money.
It means you get to play D&D with what should be a highly competent, skilled DM. You can still play badly, and you're still going to have to abide by rules of basic human decency.
Yeah, the DM was well within his right to tell him to go screw himself. I can't believe that he was like, "No, I need all my money back because my character died this one session." Okay, I mean, I get you're upset. It's always bound to happen, and I'm sure it's very upsetting, but that doesn't mean that you get your money back. That doesn't mean that you lost D&D. It just means you get a new character.
Coerced into a relationship with the DM. My first D&D campaign, by Reddit user Jun Soo Jin. Where do I even begin with this? I had never even once in my life played D&D before, but I was really into the Just Roll With It podcast and was really interested in trying it out. One day at a parade, I noticed two guys with D20 bracelets. Let's call them Jake and Aiden. I walked up to them and struck up conversation about D&D. They were really friendly and ended up giving me their socials. A little while later, they invited me to a campaign that Jake was DMing and Aiden was a player in. It turned out that it was a sci-fi campaign with a lot of homebrew, so I was in over my head from the start. But Jake and Aiden helped me make a character for the setting, and I learned how to play 5e in my spare time. Before I knew it, the day of the first session, I would be joining had come. I should mention here that I'm a girl, and almost the entire rest of the group were men. I had a lot of fun at first, mostly because I had no idea what was going on. I would eventually find out that Jake's campaign was originally supposed to be a book, but he liked it so much that he decided to make a campaign out of it with minimal changes to the plot and structure. Literally the DM who should have just been an author trope. And it was painfully obvious that it was not originally intended to be a campaign. We were heavily railroaded and had to take orders directly from a self-insert character named Knight Zion. I am not making this up.
No. Knight Zion. Oh, God, that is painful. That's painful.
He's just so edgy and dark and mysterious and misunderstood. Oh, Jesus Christ. The plot was also so convoluted that only Jake himself understood it, and he prided himself on this fact. But all of these constraints and craziness couldn't take away the magic of my first time playing D&D, and I really enjoyed it for a few months. Then it started getting weird.
As somebody who is currently writing their first book, I get that you're really excited about what you're writing and you think you have something that's super original. You're like really in love with your characters and that's great. But this is a D&D campaign. Write the damn book because you are going to just want to control everything. You're not going to like it when your players have agency. It's going to be frustrating for everybody.
If you're going to at least adapt a book into a D&D campaign, you've got to be prepared to completely abandon anything you potentially wrote later on. Keep the main structure fine, but you've got to be flexible enough to adapt that, otherwise you're just gonna make it boring and a railroad. Jake had been hyping up the next session as the beach episode. Knight ordered the party to get some much needed rest and relaxation, and brought them to a ship that was basically a space resort. All the main characters were in swimsuits in a pool, there were parties, etc. I didn't really know what to do, and the whole thing kinda seemed out of nowhere. Then Knight started coming onto my character. I was weirded out by this, but the rest of the table was laughing and joking about it, so I just kinda went along with it. There was eventually a fade to black moment, and that was that. My character and the DM's self-insert had canonically done the deed. Gross. A few months passed, and I was hanging out at Jake's house one day when suddenly he looked really serious. He asked me if I wanted to go on a date. I wasn't attracted to him at all, but he was my friend and I didn't want to break his heart, so I said, I don't really know if I want to be in a relationship right now. He responded, you don't have to make commitments. It's just a date. I felt a little pressured and I figured I owed him at least one date since he was a good friend to me. So in a moment of weakness, I agreed.
This is a plight that those of us who have been raised as a certain gender find ourselves in, unfortunately, at least once in our lives, I feel like, where you don't want to hurt somebody, but you don't really find yourself interested in them. And I just want to say, OP, you owed him nothing. For anybody that needs to hear this, you don't owe anybody a date, no matter how nice they are to you, no matter how good of a friend they are to you. If you don't want to go, you get to say no.
Yeah, I understand it can be daunting being the only woman at a table filled with men. Almost feels inevitable one of them's going to take a shot, which there isn't necessarily anything wrong with. But putting you in a position where you felt like you had to like that and trying to coerce you further, yeah, this definitely feels uncomfortable.
There's the extra layer of ick, too, with the sort of dubiously consented upon fade to black moment that just sort of adds that extra layer, because she literally described the encounter as gross.
Yeah, the fact that you felt obligated there, I get it. A lot of people aren't confident enough to say no, and that's largely on the way society raises women. Even in a roleplay situation, you have the same rights you do in real life. You can say no. The next day, he told the entire table that we were together. Things got really bad from there. He would give me all sorts of special treatment in the campaign, even having sessions that entirely revolved around my character. All of the players started to hate me, and I had no good way of explaining to them that I didn't sign up for any of this. Jake started to get really paranoid about me talking to other male members of the group or interacting with their characters too much. He would lash out at them if he thought I was talking to them or their characters more than him, sometimes refusing to talk to me at all after the session. Eventually I had enough and broke up with him, even though I hadn't even been in the relationship by choice. In the moment, he seemed to take it pretty well, and we had a mature conversation about it. The day after that, he removed me from the D&D group chat and blocked me. I found out weeks later that he had told everyone that I had left of my own accord because I didn't want to be a player in the campaign anymore. The cherry on top, it also turned out that Jake never wanted me in the campaign in the first place. Aiden convinced him to let me join because he thought I was attractive and wanted to get closer to me. And then after weeks of me being in the campaign, Jake convinced Aiden to let him ask me out instead. I want to make it perfectly clear that these were two adult men in their 20s. Obviously I wanted nothing more to do with that D&D group after all of this. However, Aiden eventually reached out to me to apologise and informed me that they had kicked out Jake and had a new DM. So, happy ending, I guess?
Oh boy. Well, you know that thing that I said at the beginning about don't make your book into a campaign because you're going to be disappointed? That didn't turn out to be the issue in this story. If only it had.
Honestly, the second I read that first paragraph, I immediately imagined them discussing among themselves who's going to have dibs on you.
I like that OP clarified that these were two grown men in their 20s because genuinely it sounded like they were in high school.
Yeah, I was picturing teenagers up until that point.
Literally. That's literally where I was at. When the possessive, weird behavior came out, I was like, well, there it is. Of course, he's that kind of guy who can't handle the idea of somebody telling him no, or the idea that his partner would have any kind of agency of their own. So, bullet dodged, I guess. I'm really sorry that was your first experience, though, OP, genuinely.
I promise that every D&D game does not result in you being coerced into a relationship, although unfortunately it's something to watch out for. Maybe try for your friendly local game store, see if there's games you can join, ideally one with at least one other woman player at the table.
I will say that is kind of always a red flag for me of joining games where it's like, am I going to be the only female player? Yes? No, I don't want to join because you just don't know. DM initiates Order 66 to take my player agency by Reddit user BD Cothill. A few years ago, I had been attending my local game shop to get my D&D itch scratched, and had been playing in a league for a while at that point at random tables each week, essentially. After a session like this, someone from the table mentioned that they were going to be DMing a homebrew campaign and asked if I wanted to join them. I was excited to have a home campaign again, and in my opinion, the league sessions get a bit repetitive, and it's nice to have consistent players and continuity. In this case, I decided to play a character that I had made earlier and had been wanting to play, a Warforged Druid from the Unearthed Arcana at this point. The DM gave me a green light and even had a portrait made of the character via commission. I was excited to play the character. Something important to note about Warforged race is their origins state that they are created as a mindless automatons to fight the wars, but after some improvements to their designs, they unexpectedly became fully sentient, feel pain, emotions, etc., so no longer are they mindless automatons. It was finally time to meet up for the first session, and I was told to meet at the local Denny's that they had rented a room out of. This should have been the first flag in hindsight, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. Upon arriving, it quickly became clear as to why they wanted to rent a room at Denny's, as there were 14 players in the campaign. Huge red flag number 2.
14! How can you even comprehend trying to have a D&D game with that many? 7's a lot. That should be 2 large games.
I already knew that this would be a crapshoot at this point, but I decided to play it out and see how it goes. Even then, it started out pretty poorly. There were some competing personalities that made up the heroes. I honestly only remember 2 of the characters other than my own, however, because they were the personalities in question. The first was a lawful good paladin who described himself essentially as Batman, but as a paladin. Okay, whatever. The second player, I don't recall his class, and I think that he was a homebrew, but they described themselves as the Joker and wanted to sow chaos, which I'm not sure the DM intended to mesh with the aforementioned lawful good paladin. I recall being locked in a room and needing to find a way out, and asked if it was possible for me to wild shape into something, such as a fly or a flea, to get out. The DM indicated it wouldn't be possible as there weren't any default stat blocks for such creatures, which I accepted as fair and tried to find another method to escape since I was still trying to make it work at that time. There aren't any stat blocks for, like, a fly?
Generally speaking, I've never known wild shape to be used to turn into anything that small. It does kind of break the game if you can become something almost imperceivable like a flea. However, the DM could just port stats from a similar creature. But like I said, maybe there's just nothing even remotely comparable for something so small and insignificant.
We were at an event when the Joker character pulled out bombs and started lighting the place up, certainly sowing chaos. The turns took quite a while to complete, of course, given that there were 14 of us, so it was a while to even get to this point. Shortly after, however, the guards were hot on our tails and trying to capture us due to the exploding in the building, which is where I decided that I was definitely not coming back. The DM describes the guard as heading our way, and as I try to describe my planned actions, the DM dropped a bomb on me figuratively. He said that the guards initiated Order 66. Yes, like Star Wars. And my character instantly shut down and was unable to perform any actions, as this was actually a secret backdoor access code to the automatons. I was honestly taken aback, as I was never told that this was an aspect of the Warforged in his campaign, and clearly against the description of my race I mentioned earlier, that the specifics that they are fully sentient creatures. The first session ended shortly after that point, and I never spoke with the DM again.
Sort of defies the point of them gaining sentience if a secret backdoor access code still works on them to shut them down. Also, something like that should really have been discussed as player mechanics in advance.
Oh yeah, 100%. If you're gonna have a little cheat sheet to the character, you gotta let your player know, because otherwise this stuff happens.
It's like when a good aligned warlock has an evil patron that might be able to compel them to do evil things, and you have to roll to resist it. You can agree that in advance with the DM and work out a mechanic for it, if that's something you want as a player. However, that's not really something the DM should be inserting and forcing on you and completely changing the way your character functions.
Yeah, exactly. If you wanted to have something like that, where it's like roll to resist, quote unquote, Order 66, that honestly is kind of an interesting idea for a Warforged. If you have a warlock that's good aligned that has an evil patron and the DM just automatically makes them bad, it would be just the same as going to the Warforged and be like, you are no longer sentient because I said so.
As soon as OP mentioned a player describing themselves as the Joker, I was beginning to think the left turn was going to be they were the problem rather than the DM. Unfortunately, that feels to be an edgelord red flag more than it should be.
Oh, I think that they were definitely an edgelord, and probably somewhere out there, there's somebody that has a horror story about the Joker character. It just doesn't happen to be this person.
Fortunately, OP ran before the Joker player became the problem.
Hey, Hugh.
Yes, man.
Why are dragons so much fun at parties?
Why?
Because they're great at icebreakers.
And with that, we have definitely not been two kobolds in a trench coat. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and make the necessary sacrifices to Tiamat. We'll see you next time.